I met a gypsy.
Talking about like the focus and the how focused you have to be on a race weekend and what that does for you mentally and like the personality you have. I noticed like people talk a lot about like the difference between the riders nowadays and like, you know, the guys like from like Rossi's era where you had these big personalities and stuff. I feel like these days it's like it's so much focus put in because there's so many little details you have to be focused on and all the other distractions. I could see why a lot of riders feel like closed off. They don't want to speak. They want to keep themselves contained in this like bubble.
Yeah, your little protected space.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of the personalities have kind of gone down a little bit, you know, or they're just boring. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hard one, because like, especially in my business, I'm in like literally in the personality business. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to have this conversation where people get to know you, but you can see why people don't have these, and people like the sport wants the big personalities, and
Yeah.
the sport was the biggest when it was a Rossi. And then you had the Rossi and the Stone. And not that Casey was a big personality, but it was almost like the antithesis.
But he was like, it was all part of it. Like he had a voice though. He would speak out. And even if people didn't like it, he still had a voice. And like, I feel like there's this like fear of speaking out these days because you're like, what is this going to come back? Or for me, it's like, I just don't want that negative energy distracting me from what I got to go do right now, you know?
Yeah, but I think that you're right. Like a lot of the guys just aren't willing to step out of the box. And again, like some people, they want to be so, you know, focused and so in that zone that anything else is just going to be too big of a distraction. But it's not very safe. You know, like you step outside and you show your personality, you're going to immediately attract attention, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like there's such an economy around attention, but then that attention can also be quite negative if you don't have the tools to block it out, or if it's going to take too much of your energy to block it out. You know,
I also think there's just some guys that are just, they can't help but be interesting. Like Rossi is just like, I mean,
yeah, he's just a cool cat.
He's just so interesting. You just look at him, the way he conducts himself, you're like, I just love this guy. He's so interesting. And like, he doesn't even speak English that well, you know? But the way he speaks English, you're just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's funny, like Marquez too. I don't know if I think off the track Marquez is such a big personality or super interesting, you know? Like, I feel like he's more, his personality is shown on the track.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
more like
him,
an artist kind of.
Yeah, and like comparing him to the other, like what you're saying, it's like the whole show of it. It was like him against Rossi. That was so interesting. Or him against Lorenzo. Or like even Lorenzo, like, I mean, I don't know. Or actually Danny Pedrosa is a good example. I was such a big Danny Pedrosa fan, but he's not that interesting to listen to. Do you know what I mean? He's very monotone the way he spoke. But just the way he rides, and like, I think it was just the collection of all the different riders racing against each other made it so interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
In that era.
In that era. Like, that's the era I grew up watching. You know?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
And what do you think now? Because, I mean, I'm definitely of the opinion that the guys now aren't super interesting, or they're not very outspoken. Or, yeah, it doesn't have the same type of feeling. And I don't hold that against anybody. And for the reasons that we spoke about, like, I can see why they don't. But it doesn't have that feeling that it used to.
I don't know. I have some theories, but I don't know if I'm right. It feels to me everyone's kind of this new era of like social media and like trends and everyone following each other. And like there was this thing like, you know, the training camps, everyone went and did the same thing. They're all buddies with each other, especially like the Spanish. And yeah, it's just too Spanish maybe. You need more international, man.
No, I agree. I agree with that as well.
But, you know, I think there's also this thing like when you have different people from different backgrounds, they bring something from themselves, you know, to the sport. And a guy from America is going to be different than someone who's raised in Spain. It's just going to be different.
Yeah.
And you're going to see those different personalities. And not that it's anything wrong having Spanish, because I love the Spanish riders. Like, I mean, Marquez is probably like riding technique and just his whole story with his, when he came back from his injury is the most inspiring thing ever. I'm such a huge Marquez fan. And a lot of these Spanish riders and Italian riders are just incredible riders. But yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, MotoGP's a show. It's an entertainment show, like for the viewer. Mm-hmm. For us, it's our like life. It's what we want. But if you're selling it to an audience and you want to create some sort of entertainment aspect to it, and I personally think there needs to be, and maybe obviously I'm biased because I'm racing and I'd like to be in MotoGP, but just honestly speaking, as a fan of the sport, it'd be nice to see more personalities in like different countries and stuff like that. Like more British, Cal Crutchlow, such an interesting character. I miss him in the sport, honestly, like his openness and he wasn't always even the best guy. I feel like also these like, he just was like, he's a very good rider and could win on his day, but he was just a crazy cool personality. And I think he was really crucial for the sport too.
Yeah.
Or like Colin Edwards,
Yeah.
like he never won a race, but he was in it for so long because he's just such an interesting person. You can't help but root for him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not saying you should hire people that aren't good because they're interesting, but right now this sport is so competitive and there's so many riders that are so good, especially in Moto2, that like if you gave them a chance, I think they would show what they could do.
Yeah.
Like the difference is we're talking about tenths here. It's like I don't know. I think that's something that's needed is diversity in the nationalities.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing. I mean, you see it in F1 too. Like there really isn't personalities in F1. Like really, I think that. Yeah, who's the most personable F1 driver?
I probably like Lewis Hamilton. I think he's the most like different.
Does he have any personality?
I don't know. I don't really watch Formula One to be honest.
Fair, okay. But I mean, I feel like Lewis like doesn't exactly have any personality. His personality is more like the clothes that he wears, who he's dating, how much money he makes. Like,
no, I know. Back in the day, even in like old F1, like Schumacher, like he was such a character. The way he dressed and all these things, the things he'd do. Like, dude, I miss that. Like, I miss like the early 2000 looks and like people.
Yeah.
The way they conducted themselves, it was just like a cool era.
Yeah.
I feel like we're just caught up in like the trends and all the things now with like, I'm gonna sound like an old guy, but like TikTok and Instagram,
I'm
like
fully with you.
And like always like the thing to connect with people, I feel like as like, and I'm not bashing like the social media people and, MotoGP or things like that. I know everyone's pushing to try to make it, connectable, but I feel like it's just like, well, what's the latest trend in Instagram? Let's replicate that. But sometimes it's like, even like, I feel like Europe gets like these trends like 4 years later than what America has.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's people doing like the flip cup or the bottle flip thing.
Yeah, like we probably just don't need that
it's
at all.
Come on, we don't need to do that. You know, I loved like stuff like, I was talking to Mark Neal from Faster. Do you know that movie?
Yeah.
Dude, that movie to me was so like inspiring as a young rider, and just like the cinematography. Thank you.
Yeah.
That aspect, like showing like a movie aspect to what we do and building a character is so like important, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's, and it's not even like in Formula One, it's a perfect example. That whole Netflix show, you take some, these drivers that all kind of do the same thing, probably off the track, doing the same type of thing. Very similar. But you create kind of these like story behind it all, and you've made it interesting and connectable, especially in like, if the market is America, that is what people in America, we're like, we watch movies, we watch all these things. This is like where it's all from. Yeah. That's what we're searching for, is like a story to connect to.
And like character development, you know, like I think one of the things, this might be kind of what you're saying in a way, like I know Jack very well, Miller personally, right? That he's a crazy fucking dude.
Yeah.
Like he's a very wild guy in terms of like the things that he's into, the way he grew up. Like, his story is crazy. And people, like, don't really know it. They don't really get to see it. And then anytime he's gone out and, like, kind of had his... like, he even speaks to the media in, like, this European accent.
I know.
And it's just like, he's the fucking
Yeah.
biggest bogan in the best way. Like,
Yeah.
he's from way up north, lives on a farm, like, cattle on his property. Like, so the boxes that people naturally, they're either put in or they fall in or they want to just, like, get in line to not rock the boat. Like, whatever it is that funnels in the big personality into, like, the little box. And it's like, maybe that's kind of just what's happening with everybody, is that they're all just like, fuck it.
Yeah.
Just fall in. I'll just fall into my box.
Yeah.
I'll speak in my Euro accent and I'll just kind of get in line. And maybe that's just this, like, natural thing that, because the sport doesn't celebrate or isn't, like, actively trying. Like, I don't know, maybe Fabio Quartararo is, like, way different than what we see, but because of the Instagram and the social media and the way that the media treats people if they say one thing or the other, you know, like, you kind of need these dudes that are just like, fuck it, I'm just going to be myself.
But it's also the way you capture that.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's like how if you were to come to me and ask me some of the most generic questions, you'd get generic answers.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
For
you kind
sure.
of have to, like, capture people when they're not looking, or, like, get those angles that maybe those riders don't want to be shown, you know? And that's
For sure.
If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.